"Get out of my property. Your lease is officially canceled, and you have exactly 10 minutes to pack your things and vacate the premises." The 34-year-old heir sneered, slapping a fabricated eviction notice on the glass counter. I looked at him, then at the heavy steel chains his security team was wrapping around the gates. I didn't raise my voice. I simply packed my personal records, knowing that the moment I walked out, the recorded easement on his loading dock and parking lot would freeze his $60 million high-rise development plan. They believed they were clearing out a stubborn old tenant to make way for a lucrative project. They did not realize they were activating a legal self-defense mechanism that would lock down the very ground they stood on. For 22 years, I had occupied the historic brick building at 104 Pine Street, right in the beating heart of Seattle's Pike Place neighborhood. I was Arthur Pendleton, 54 years old, and my business, Pendleton Coffee Roasters, was a local institution. The smell of freshly roasted organic dark beans drifted from our industrial roasters every morning, drawing in locals, tourists, and nearby business owners. I had started this venture in 2004, back when the neighborhood was still gritty and neglected. The owner of the property at the time was Richard Vance, a fair-minded developer who appreciated the stability of a reliable, long-term commercial tenant. Together, we negotiated a 30-year lease with structured, predictable adjustments that kept our rent at a manageable $8,500 a month. Because the property shared a narrow alleyway and a vital loading dock with the adjacent commercial buildings owned by Vance, I knew that maintaining operational access would be the lifeblood of my business. Before I ever roasted my first batch of green coffee beans, I spent a decade practicing commercial real estate law in downtown Seattle. I knew how property covenants worked, and I understood the power of recorded easements. During our initial lease negotiations in 2004, I insisted on inserting Clause 18D into the lease agreement. It was a reciprocal access and loading dock easement which granted Pendleton Coffee Roasters a non-revocable, perpetual easement over the property's sole common driveway, loading dock in the central parking plaza. More importantly, we didn't just keep this clause in our lease document. We recorded a formal memorandum of lease and easement directly with the King County Recorder's Office. This public recording meant the easement became an official encumbrance on the property's title. It ran with the land, meaning it remained legally binding on any future owners, developers, or lenders who might acquire the property in the future. Over the next 2 decades, my business thrived. We expanded our operations, supplying custom coffee roasts to 65 local cafes and gourmet markets across the Pacific Northwest, generating an average of $2.8 million in annual recurring revenue. Our daily operations were a finely tuned machine, dependent on large delivery trucks arriving at our loading dock at 6:01 a.m. to unload heavy burlap sacks of green coffee beans imported from South America and East Africa. Our industrial roasting equipment, including a customized German Probat drum roaster worth $180,000, was permanently anchored to the building's reinforced concrete foundation. The building wasn't just a storefront. It was a heavy industrial facility disguised as a cozy cafe. Richard Vance remained our landlord for 20 years, and we maintained a warm, professional relationship. He would frequently stop by for a cup of espresso and chat about the growth of the neighborhood. But the stable landscape we had enjoyed for 2 decades was shattered when Richard passed away in 2024 at the age of 70, leaving his entire commercial real estate empire to his only son, Ryan Vance. The transition of power was immediate and jarring. The old mahogany-furnished offices of Vance Properties were stripped down within weeks, replaced by sleek, minimalist glass and steel. Long-term staff members who had worked with Richard for decades were quietly forced out or offered minimal retirement packages. I watched this from my storefront just down the street, realizing that the community-focused ethos of the neighborhood was about to be challenged. Ryan Vance brought in a new team of property managers who seemed to view tenants not as partners but as financial obstacles to be overcome. The daily interactions became sterile, handled entirely through automated portals and legal notices. I knew my below-market lease was a prime target for them, but I also knew the law, and I had spent my entire life preparing for the moment when a contract would be the only thing standing between my business and ruin. I made sure my rent was paid via certified mail, exactly 5 days early every month, and I documented every interaction, preparing for the inevitable storm. Ryan Vance was 34 years old, held a prestigious Ivy League MBA, and viewed his late father's real estate portfolio through the narrow lens of financial spreadsheets and developer margins. Ryan didn't care about community landmarks or long-term partnerships. He cared about maximizing the value of the family assets, which were valued at $80 million. Within months of taking control of Vance Properties, Ryan partnered with Bradley Cole, a director at Apex Development Group, a massive private equity firm specializing in high-density urban residential projects. Together, they formulated a plan to demolish the entire historic block at Pine Street and replace it with the Vance Spire, a $60 million luxury high-rise condominium project. To fund the development, they secured a $45 million commercial construction loan from Northwest Syndicate Bank. However, there was a major obstacle in their path: my commercial lease. I had 8 years remaining on my initial 30-year lease, plus 2 5-year extension options, meaning I had the legal right to occupy the building until 2042. Under our contract, my monthly rent was locked at $8,500, while the current market rate for commercial space in Pike Place had skyrocketed to $25,000 a month. To build the Vance Spire, the developers needed to demolish my building. Bradley Cole advised Ryan that buying me out would cost at least $2.5 million, representing the value of my remaining lease, relocation costs, and business interruption damages. Ryan, eager to impress the board of directors and preserve his profit margins, decided that instead of negotiating a fair buyout, he would find a way to terminate my lease for cause, evicting me without paying a single penny. The harassment campaign began in the spring of 2026. Ryan's property managers started issuing daily citations for minor technical lease violations. They claimed that my delivery vans parked in the common alleyway during loading hours violated the building's vehicle parking regulations. They sent a formal notice to cure, alleging that our outdoor display of coffee bags on the sidewalks was an unauthorized alteration of the premises. They even sent inspectors to examine the building's electrical system, claiming that a minor electrical outlet installed by a licensed, certified electrician in my roasting room was a breach of the lease because I had not obtained the landlord's prior written consent. I responded to every single notice with certified legal letters, detailing how these claims did not constitute material breaches under Washington state law, and showing that all minor issues had been addressed within the standard 10-day cure window. On a rainy Friday afternoon in July 2026, the conflict reached its breaking point. Ryan Vance walked into my coffee shop, accompanied by the building's property manager and 2 private security officers. He carried a document titled Notice of Immediate Lease Termination and Unlawful Detainer. He claimed that my delivery trucks had parked in the alleyway overnight on 2 occasions, which he defined as an uncured, repeated material breach of the lease. "Your lease is officially canceled, Arthur," Ryan said with an arrogant smirk. "You have exactly 10 minutes to pack your personal files and get out of the building. The security guards are locking the doors, and if you attempt to re-enter, you will be arrested for criminal trespass. Any equipment left behind will be considered abandoned property." I looked at the document and immediately recognized it as a completely illegal self-help eviction. Under Washington state law, RCC 59-1203-0, a landlord cannot physically lock out a commercial tenant or seize their property without first filing an unlawful detainer lawsuit and obtaining a formal writ of restitution from a superior court judge. Ryan was bypassing the legal system entirely, hoping to intimidate me into abandoning my space. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue or plead. I simply looked Ryan in the eye, packed my laptop, my business records, and my historic roasting blueprints into a single leather bag. "Understood, Ryan," I said quietly. I walked out of the building, listening to the metallic clinking of the heavy chains being wrapped around the front entrance. I knew that the battle was no longer in the coffee shop. It was in the county records, and I had the ultimate weapon. As I stood on the wet pavement, watching the security guards secure the padlocks, I felt a strange sense of calm. The rain was cold, washing over the streets of Seattle, but my mind was warm with the anticipation of what was to come. Ryan stood under a black umbrella, watching me walk toward my car with my single bag of belongings. He had the satisfied look of a man who believed he had just saved his company millions of dollars with a single stroke of authority. What he failed to realize was that in commercial real estate, possession is only a small fraction of the law. By choosing to lock me out without a court order, he had bypassed the very legal protections that would have shielded his development project from my recorded rights. He had chosen the path of force, and in doing so, he had walked directly into the legal trap I had set more than 2 decades ago. I spent Saturday morning at the dining room table of my home, surrounded by files and real estate law textbooks. The rain was drumming against the window glass, but I felt a sense of absolute focus. Ryan Vance's arrogance was his fatal flaw. He believed that because his family owned the physical land, he held all the power. He did not understand the profound legal distinction between a leasehold estate, which is a temporary possessory interest, and a recorded easement, a pertinent, which is a permanent property right. Under Clause 18D of the lease agreement that I had drafted 22 years ago, the reciprocal easement for the loading dock and parking plaza was structured as a separate, independent covenant that would survive any unilateral termination of the lease by the landlord. The clause explicitly stated, in the event that the landlord terminates this lease or executes a possessory lockout of the tenant without a final, non-appealable judicial decree of material breach from a court of competent jurisdiction, the tenant's reciprocal access easement over the driveway, loading dock, and parking area, the easement area shall immediately convert into a perpetual, non-revocable easement appurtenant for a nominal consideration of $1 per annum. This easement shall run with the land and bind all successor owners. Furthermore, no structural alterations, demolition, or construction activity shall be permitted with the easement area, or on the adjacent parcels if such activity interferes with the easement holder's access rights, without the express written consent of the easement holder. Because this easement had been recorded in the King County Public Records, in 2004, it was a permanent cloud on the property's title. Any title insurance company conducting a title search would flag it immediately. If the easement was active, the landlord could not build the foundation for the Vance Spire as the planned structural footprint of the high-rise physically overlapped with the loading dock and driveway covered by my easement. I went to work. I drafted a formal Notice of Easement Conversion and Enforcement of Restrictive Covenant, outlining Ryan's illegal lockout and declaring that the easement had now converted into a perpetual right of access. I signed the document in front of a notary public. Next, I prepared a summons and complaint for wrongful eviction, breach of contract, and quiet title under RCW 728-01, requesting a judicial order to clear the title cloud by enforcing my easement rights. Along with the lawsuit, I drafted a formal lis pendens, notice of pending litigation, which legally alerts the public and any potential lenders that the property's title and access rights are subject to an active court battle. On Saturday afternoon, I drove to the King County Administration Building and filed the lis pendens and the easement conversion notice. The documents were officially recorded in the county land logs. Once the filings were processed, I compiled a digital package containing the recorded documents, a copy of the illegal lockout notice, and the original lease agreement. I drafted a formal letter addressed to the commercial lending team at Northwest Syndicate Bank, the institution that was underwriting Ryan's $45 million construction loan. I wrote, "Please be advised that Vance Properties is currently in default of its title obligations. Pendleton Coffee Roasters has recorded a perpetual easement and filed a lis pendens against the property at 104 Pine Street. Under the terms of your construction loan agreement, the borrower must maintain a clear, unencumbered title. Any construction activity on the site will constitute a willful violation of our recorded easement rights, and we will seek an immediate federal injunction to halt all site work." I hit send on the email, knowing that the bank's automated compliance systems would flag the notice before the markets opened on Monday. I then spent Sunday contacting my wholesale clients. I assured them that their weekly orders would not be interrupted. I had already arranged to lease a temporary roasting facility in the industrial area of Georgetown, which possessed a fully certified commercial roaster that I could use during the transition. My operations would continue, albeit in a different location, but my legal presence at 104 Pine Street remained active and immovable. I knew that the title records were now locked, and the gears of the financial system would do the work for me. The bank's risk assessment algorithms and the title underwriters would look at the recorded Liz pendants and the easement notice and see a massive, unacceptable financial risk. There was no way they would allow the developer to draw down funds while such an encumbrance remained on the property. Monday morning at 8 a.m., the consequences of Ryan Vance's rash actions became painfully visible. A massive fleet of demolition trucks, heavy excavators, and construction crews from Apex Development Group arrived at Pine Street, prepared to begin tearing down the historic warehouse. The project manager, a burly man named Dave, was ready to coordinate the work. But before the first excavator could touch the brick facade, a black sedan arrived at the site. It was the regional risk director from Chicago Title, the company, providing the title insurance policy for the Vance Spire project. The risk director informed Dave that the title company had withdrawn its clean title policy over the weekend due to the newly recorded list pendants and the perpetual access easement filed by Pendleton Coffee Roasters. Under the terms of the construction loan agreement between Vance Properties and Northwest Syndicate Bank, the bank could not disburse the first $15 million construction draw without a fully active, unencumbered title insurance policy. The bank's underwriters had automatically frozen the loan accounts, refusing to release a single dollar for construction. The site fell silent. The excavators remained idle, and the demolition crews sat on the curb, drinking coffee. Apex Development Group was now facing contractor standby fees of $15,000 a day for the idle machinery and personnel. Bradley Cole, the director at Apex, was furious. He called Ryan Vance into an emergency meeting at the site office. "Ryan, what the hell is this?" Bradley yelled, slamming a printout of the King County land records on the table. "Our title insurance is canceled. The bank has frozen the loan draw. We have 40 workers sitting idle, costing us $15,000 a day in standby fees. Your father assured us this property would be cleared. You told us you evicted the tenant. Why is there a recorded perpetual easement on our loading dock?" Ryan's face turned white as he stared at the document. "It's just a coffee shop tenant," Ryan stammered, his confident demeanor vanishing. "I evicted them on Friday for parking violations. The lease is terminated. This easement must be invalid. Our lawyers will get it thrown out of court." "We don't have time for a court case, you idiot," Bradley shouted. "A quiet title lawsuit will take at least 6 to 12 months to resolve. The bank will not wait. If the loan remains frozen for more than 10 days, they have the right to cancel the financing entirely. If we lose the loan, Apex is pulling out of this project, and we will sue Vance Properties for the $10 million in development costs we've already spent. You need to fix this right now." At 9:30 a.m., my phone began to ring. It was Ryan Vance. I let it ring for 3 full cycles, enjoying the cool morning breeze on my deck before I finally answered. "Arthur Pendleton," I said. "Arthur, you need to withdraw this garbage filing immediately," Ryan screamed, his voice cracking with panic. "You are sabotaging a $60 million project. We will sue you for damages. We will ruin you. You have no right to block our construction." "Actually, Ryan, I have every right," I replied, keeping my voice level and calm. As a former real estate attorney, I wrote Clause 18D specifically for this scenario. Your illegal lockout on Friday triggered the perpetual easement and the negative covenant. My easement occupies the exact footprint of your planned high-rise foundation. Any demolition or construction on that land is a violation of my property rights. If you try to tear down the building, my attorneys will file a federal injunction by noon. If you want to sue me, please do. The discovery process will expose your fabricated default notices to the court, and the judge will happily award me triple damages for wrongful eviction. Have a nice day, Ryan. I hung up the phone and poured myself another cup of dark roast coffee, knowing that the trap was fully closed. 10 minutes later, the chairman of the board of Vance Properties, Thomas Vance, called. His tone was vastly different from his nephew's. He was polite, controlled, and deeply concerned. "Arthur, we need to talk," he said. "This situation is spiraling out of control. The bank has confirmed the freeze, and Apex is threatening a massive lawsuit. We need to find a way to resolve this. Can we meet this afternoon?" I agreed, but only if the meeting took place at my home, on my terms, and with a formal settlement draft ready for review. I was not going to step foot in their offices, nor was I going to allow them to dictate the venue. The power had shifted completely, and I was going to ensure they felt the weight of their new reality. I did not have to wait long for the final surrender. At 2 p.m. on Monday afternoon, the chairman of the board of directors of Vance Properties, accompanied by Bradley Cole from Apex Development and a pale, silent Ryan Vance, arrived at my home. The chairman, a dignified man named Thomas Vance, who was Richard's older brother, looked exhausted. He carried a leather folder under his arm. We sat at my dining room table, the very table where I had drafted the easement 22 years ago. "Arthur," Thomas Vance began, his voice quiet, "we are here to resolve this matter. The board has held an emergency meeting. If the bank cancels the construction loan, Vance Properties faces financial ruin. We cannot afford a protracted legal battle that freezes our development site. We are prepared to offer you your space back and reinstate your lease under the original terms." "No," I replied, leaning back in my chair. "The lease is terminated, and I have already secured a temporary roasting facility. I will not return to a building owned by a landlord who uses illegal lockouts to harass tenants. I am prepared to release the easement and the Liz pendants, but only on my terms. They are non-negotiable." I slid a typed settlement agreement across the table. The terms were precise. First, Vance Properties must pay me a cash settlement of $2,500,000 to purchase and release the easement and resolve all claims of wrongful eviction. The funds must be wired to my corporate escrow account before any filings are withdrawn. Second, Vance Properties must provide me with a fully paid out, zero-rent lease for a premium 2,000 square foot retail space on the ground corner of the new Vance Spire high-rise, facing Pine Street and First Avenue for a term of 15 years. This represents a value of approximately $2 million in free rent over the lease term. Third, the board of directors must issue an official written apology, signed by every board member, admitting that the default notices were baseless and the eviction was wrongful. Fourth, Ryan Vance must be immediately terminated from his role as CEO of Vance Properties for gross negligence and breach of fiduciary duty to the company's shareholders. Ryan Vance jumped to his feet. "This is extortion. Uncle Thomas, you can't agree to this. He's stealing $2.5 million from us. We can fight this in court." "Sit down, Ryan," Thomas Vance snapped, his voice sharp with anger. "Your arrogance has cost this company $2.5 million, and it has almost destroyed your father's legacy. If Arthur files his injunction, we lose the bank loan. If we lose the loan, we are liable to Apex for $10 million, and our reputation in the industry is permanently ruined. Your career with this company is over." Ryan slowly sat down, his head bowed, his hands shaking. The chairman turned back to me, picked up his pen, and signed the settlement agreement. Bradley Cole signed as a witness. Within 2 hours, my bank confirmed that the wire transfer of $2,500,000 had cleared. My attorney filed the dismissal of the lawsuit and the release of the easement, allowing Chicago Title to issue the policy and the bank to release the loan. The construction of the Vance Spire resumed the next morning, but Ryan Vance was nowhere to be seen. He was unceremoniously fired by the board, stripped of his executive authority, and banished from the family real estate business. His career was ruined, and his name was disgraced. I moved my roasting operations to a state-of-the-art facility in the industrial district, expanding our wholesale business significantly. A year later, when the Vance Spire was completed, Pendleton Coffee Roasters opened its flagship cafe on the ground floor corner. Every morning I sit at the window table, sipping a fresh espresso, paying zero rent, and looking out at the Pike Place crowd. It is a daily reminder that while land is valuable, the laws that protect the people who build on it are far more powerful. Thomas Vance often stops by the new cafe for a cup of coffee, much like his brother Richard used to do. We don't speak of the lawsuit or the transition of power. We speak of the quality of the roast and the growth of the neighborhood. The new building is a sleek monument to modern design, but for me, its foundation will always represent the legal battle we fought and won on this corner. Ryan Vance has disappeared from the city's real estate circles, his name a cautionary tale of what happens when greed and ignorance clash with the rule of law. My business continues to thrive, built on a foundation far stronger than concrete and steel.